was watching. One sheriff's deputy, an Air Force veteran, saved an American flag when a recent storm knocked it down. It was all caught on security camera and now is going viral. That patriot, Clay County, Missouri Sheriff's Deputy Brandon McElroy joins me now. Brandon, thank you very much. First of all, for your service in the Air Force, but also your service in your county as well as a sheriff's deputy. You were presumably on the job, out and about, and there had been a storm. You saw something. What was your first reaction?
Well, seeing the flag down, my first reaction was to do the right thing and make sure to show its respect and pick it up off the ground.
Is that something you see frequently? Are you on the lookout for it? How did it catch your eye?
I'm not necessarily on the lookout for it, but driving that area, I've always noticed his flag pull up with the flag waving, and driving through that area that particular morning, I noticed that it was down and just had to pick it up. Did you notice
I don't know if it's a Ring doorbell system or some sort of a camera doorbell system. Did you have any idea that what you were doing could be seen or was being seen?
Honestly, no. I didn't see it, and I didn't think that it was going to be videoed the way it was, so I had no idea.
And then when did you realize it had been filmed and that a lot of people were reacting emotionally, positively, patriotically to it?
Later that day, I was actually approached by the homeowner's wife, who had found me while I was still on patrol and had thanked me for it, and said that they had saw it on their Ring camera. And of course, that was hours later after I'd already finished picking up the flag.
Mm-hmm. Sheriff, talk to us first about your service in the military.
Served 7.5 years in the United States Air Force Reserves at Whiteman Air Force Base.
And why did you decide to continue?
Security Forces member.
Security Forces member. So you took that service and continued it in your community. When you look at that flag that you still defend today, what does it mean to you?
It means a lot to me. Growing up, you're showing respect to you show your respect to the flag, and doing little things such as making sure it doesn't touch the ground, or picking it up off the ground, or just little things you can show its respect. So you try to show it every day.
Why do those little things matter so much? Because the big thing, we talk about big issues and big topics and patriotism all day long, but this kind of thing, unseen, no one was going to know anything about it other than that homeowner when they found a well-folded flag on their doorstep. Why do the small things matter so much?
It's doing the right thing when nobody's watching. It's just making sure that, even the small tasks, don't have to amount up to anything. Sometimes they do, but just doing the small tasks to make sure that you're still taking care of everything on the home front.
Brandon, what are your message to those who have been taught, indoctrinated, or their just belief is that America's not a special place, or that flag is just a cloth, that the reverence you show is unnecessary or outdated? What's your message to them?
Something as small as that cloth represents a lot in this country, whether it's the men and women that have died for it or the men and women that still wear it to this day, serving our country so we can have our freedoms that we have and enjoy the things that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Listen, my life is better because of men like you every day on our streets, protecting us and reminding us of what a special country we live in. Deputy Brandon McElroy, Sheriff's Deputy in Clay County, Missouri. Thank you very much for your service and your time on Fox and Friends this morning. We are grateful.
Thank you.
You got it, sir. Thank you. All right, Beto O'Rourke in an all-out blitz as he makes his presidential run official. We knew that all along, but he finalized it yesterday. How he's taking aim at President Trump as he tries to reclaim his star status in the Lone Star State. And in another story, it's being called the Fry Festival. Fire Festival? Light? We'll show you the chaos at another music festival. You know about the Fire Festival going sideways. It happened again, and we'll bring it to you.
President doubling down on his crackdown on illegal immigration, threatening to shut down the southern border.
We're not going to give them hundreds of billions of dollars and tell them that they're not going to use their strong immigration laws to help the United States.
We are safe because we are a city of immigrants and asylum seekers.
A prime example of what a total failure Donald Trump has been on the issue of immigration.
Democrats, stop attacking Donald Trump and go find something positive that you can actually do for the country.
A suspect has been arrested and charged with murder and kidnapping in connection with the death of a University of South Carolina student.
Fallout continues from the Mueller probe.
I completely think that they are willing to lie 100% for anything because they can't fight this president on policy.
AOC and her socialist compadres are nothing but fear-mongers.
Of the Final Four Club, and they hail from Lubbock, Texas. The Red Raiders of Texas Tech are going to the Final Four for the first time in program history.
I did it in heels. These two took a ton of practice swings, and nobody told me you have to take your jacket off. It was unfair. I demand a rematch.
I thought about saying take off your jacket.
Oh, he thought about it, but then he was like, yeah, but if I tell her that, she might win. So, no, I actually didn't hit one ball. But my friend who's a baseball player was watching from home, and he was like, they should have told you to take that jacket off. And I said, that's how the cheaters work. When they cheat at the game.
Okay, Ginger Rogers.
You had a nice swing,
social media.
Yeah, I tried. No, I'm just playing with you guys, honestly. You guys did a great job.
It's great to be outdoors.
I gotta let you win sometimes.
I know. So. That's what I said to Ed for a whole year.
Yeah,
I gotta let you win sometime.
I let him down too easy. But the president is talking about finally trying to win on the border and push back on this surge that we've seen in recent days where even a senior Democrat, the former Department of Homeland Security chief for President Barack Obama, is saying, yes, it is a crisis at the border that is different from what Democratic leaders in Congress are saying, and the president is talking about drastic action this week.
That's right. That was Jay Johnson, the DHS secretary under Barack Obama, acknowledged it's a crisis on Neil Cavuto's show. But big news from yesterday as well. The president announced and the State Department confirmed the United States will be cutting payments to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras because the migrant crisis is out of control. Those governments not doing enough. And it's also part of the perspective that we've been sending aid, economic aid, development aid, and others to those countries for decades. And to what return on that investment? Right. And it's a big part of the bigger view of the world that he has. Why do we send all our money to other countries that then don't work, don't use the money properly, and then they send their people to us.
Their countries to come here.
To come to us as we pay their countries. So this is a punitive measure. It's not clear that it will impact policy per se, but it's another message to these countries south of our border that it's unacceptable that Mexico is a pass-through country, and that these other three countries are actually encouraging citizens often to come to the United States.
It's also a product of President Trump trying for months and months to work with Democrats to stress that this is a crisis at the border, to talk about the human trafficking, the drug trafficking, and getting absolutely no assistance from them and having no recourse, but to say, listen, I will shut down the southern border if I can't get help. I cannot overwhelm our border patrol, and I cannot put the national security of this country at risk. Trump coming in full form on Twitter as usual, saying Mexico must use its very strong immigration laws to stop the many thousands of people trying to get into the USA. Our detention areas are maxed out, and we will take no more illegals. Next step is to close the border. This will also help us with stopping the drug flow from Mexico. So he's being tough with Democrats, he's being tough with Mexico, he's being tough with Central America, and he really has no option but to do so. He made this campaign promise to people. He's very concerned about the safety and security of Americans, and I think a lot of Americans have his back on this one.
Yeah, now this is not unprecedented. Other presidents have done it. On the other hand, you have groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which usually is seen as a Republican organization, saying there could be really bad economic consequences if we shut down the border.
That's true.
Pete is a little skeptical.
Well, they're an establishment Republican-ish organization that's been in favor of open borders because of the desire for cheap labor. Very much not in support of the tougher immigration enforcement this president has done. But we had Doug Weed on the program earlier. He's a presidential historian. He points out that what the President Trump is doing here, if and when he closes the border, is not something that hasn't been done before. Take a listen.
Under LBJ in modern times, 1963, in 1969, Nixon shut the border down, and the Washington Post praised him for it. 1985, Ronald Reagan, facing a similar problem, shut the border down. He felt Mexico had to be punished, to be brought into line, and then for all purposes, the border was shut down after 9/11 by George W. Bush. President Donald Trump is a leader. He is a gutsy guy. It's why what has to be done.
I asked him which one of those was probably the closest comparison. He said Reagan in 1985. He was having a beef with Mexico, said we're going to send an even stronger signal. And Doug Weed also said, having served under 2 other presidents, he didn't believe those presidents would have had the guts to take this stance ultimately, because he's going to take heat for it.
So you think this is a tough stance for the president?
Well, I think it's yet another one. I mean, you declare an emergency. You talk about asylum laws. You talk about catch and release. You deploy the National Guard. You release funds from the DOD to build a border wall, all while Congress still wants to talk about comprehensive immigration reform, which didn't happen and would lead to amnesty. So this president has time and time again said he's committed.
Isn't the expectation that he would be tough, though? I mean, if people elected him, if they elected for 2 reasons, actually. One, that they felt he had a strong business background and they wanted, a businessman in office. And secondly, because they realized that he was the kind of guy that was outside of Washington, a Washington outsider who was going to go in and on these issues was not going to have loyalty to a political party, but was going to actually dig in his heels and get stuff done. So I think when he does this, I don't know that it's surprising to people, but I think it's very well received, because somebody has to dig. We're always calling on Republicans, dig your heels in, whether it's the national debt, whether it's taking on entitlements, whether it's border security, and they repeatedly disappoint us. It's nice to see someone in office who's not disappointing on the issue of digging his heels in.
He was elected in part in 2016 by showing strength in cracking down on illegal immigration. He's trying to show strength again on the Democratic side out in the hinterlands for 2020. You see him on the campaign trail saying quite the opposite in terms of open borders, tough borders, a different message. Beto O'Rourke is having a series of rallies this weekend as he sort of officially kicks off his campaign. Take a look at the length of his speeches at some of these rallies. In El Paso, Saturday, 35 minutes. Houston, 23 minutes. Austin, 22 minutes. Interesting because the president has been very effective at having these long events where he gives big speeches at the rallies, really whips up his crowd, gets his base excited. Here's Beto O'Rourke trying to get the left excited about his plans. Watch.
We're up against the biggest challenges of our lifetimes. Though we did not win our Senate race, we came really close. This president is using fear and division based on our differences of geography or race or ethnicity or religion to try to keep us apart. If we continue on this trajectory, we will be a democracy in name only. Are you with me?
This guy's full of talking points. You talked about the length of the speech, because how long could you go on saying, it's like a bunch of talking points strung together?
Who's going to play the Beto bro on Saturday Night Live? Like, why does he go on his tippy? Every time he talks, he's like crunching the microphone up against his mouth, up on his tippy toes with his same moves, same stuff, same cadence all the time. Maybe it's interesting at the beginning because you're like, oh, he's not using notes. He's doing this. But it's the same stuff, and the speeches get shorter because the information, the substance is quite shallow. And his argument is, we don't want borders. And he talks about immigrants, to your point. Of course we support immigrants, but he never talks about illegal immigration.
He conflates them conveniently.
He conflates them conveniently, and he thinks effectively. His bank shot, he thinks, I can win Texas. I could beat Trump in Texas, and I could deliver the presidency to the Democrats. We'll see how his thin resume survives this Democratic primary. But yesterday he launched, and we'll see what Robert Francis does.
Can we all be grateful that he wasn't standing on a countertop with his shoes on? I mean, that's just, be grateful for the small things. You got to take what you can get.
Well, you talk about whipping up the left these days, what Beto is trying to do on the campaign trail. That's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been doing as a freshman Democrat in the House of Representatives. But when she gets out there sometimes, she occasionally gets a little ahead of the skis, came out a couple of nights ago and claimed that Congress amended the Constitution to stop FDR from being reelected, even though that amendment process happened after she said it did. Listen to her and we'll give you the facts.
When our party was boldest, the time of the New Deal, the Great Society, the Civil Rights Act, and so on, we had and carried supermajorities in the House, in the Senate. We carried the presidency. They had to amend the Constitution of the United States to make sure Roosevelt did not get reelected. And there were so many extraordinary things that were happening in that time that were uniting working people.
Extra might be a good word, because it turns out when you look at the facts, April 12th, 1945, FDR died. March 24th, 1947, Congress approved the 22nd Amendment.
Oh, 2 years later.
2 years later,
okay,
after he died. So it did not prevent his re-election. And in February 1951, the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution.
So, of course, there were a lot of
facts are little.
Well, yeah, Yeah, there are a lot of people that felt like maybe we shouldn't elect presidents for 4 terms. George Washington set a historic precedent by only serving 2 terms. Maybe we should stick to that. Let's go back to that. So you can.
So she's right that FDR being in there for consecutive terms in general got this movement going, but
That's
to
not
say
what
it
she said,
prevented
though.
him from being reelected is not what happened.
Yeah, and it's also an important point because she's so overconfident because she's used to not being challenged and she's used to most in media supporting her, and she gets to say, oh, they just don't like me. No, the issue a lot of people have with you is that some of the stuff you say makes no sense. It makes no sense. The Green New Deal you put out makes no sense. Take some responsibility. And if you're going to talk about historical context, you got to get it right or you're going to be held to account if you want to be taken seriously.
I kind of like what she said. I say we unite the working people, we amend the Constitution, allow for 3 or 4 terms, and then Trump can run again in 2024.
Oh, so this is about Donald Trump, right?
Yeah, like if she thought that was a bad move, I'm all in. Let's amend the Constitution and see if Trump can get a third term.
4 or 5 terms?
5, 6, 7, whatever.
Whatever.
You know? Maybe we can partner on that. Tweet me, AOC.
What do you think about that? Friends at FoxNews.com. Is Pete getting a little carried away?
Yeah, maybe a little.
Hey, if it's in the Constitution.
All right, we got some headlines for you guys. We start with a heart-wrenching story. This man, Nathaniel Rowland, is charged with kidnapping and killing a South Carolina college student. Police say Samantha Josephson got into the car Rowland was driving Friday morning, thinking it was her Uber. Hunters found her body hours later in the woods near her home. Police spotted the Chevy Impala and found blood in the car. Josephson was a senior at the University of South Carolina. We're learning more about the final moments aboard the crashed Ethiopian Airlines flight that killed 157 people. The Wall Street Journal reports one of the pilots frantically said, quote, pitch up, as the Boeing 737 MAX plane dove to the ground. Officials believe a faulty flight control feature is to blame, but there is no official cause yet. 737 MAX planes remain grounded. Chilling video of an American tourist being brutally beaten in Australia in a seemingly random attack. Police say the victim was followed after getting off a tram. He was beaten unconscious, woke up, and then beaten unconscious again. The victim was rushed to the hospital with bleeding in his brain and a broken jaw. Police are looking for the attacker. A music festival in Florida goes so poorly it's being dubbed Fire Festival 2. 55,000 concertgoers stranded, forced to walk 4 miles after organizers failed to book enough buses to transport everyone. You might remember the original Fire Festival. Attendees were stranded in the Bahamas with little to no food or water.
That was the gourmet food from the Fire Festival.
You got to see that documentary. If you haven't seen it already, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
If you buy it hook, line, and sinker, you walk.
Not as good as Pete's documentary. Tonight,
That's
8
good.
p.m. Eastern.
Well, nothing is.
Thank you, Ed. All right, well, collusion, delusion. New numbers show Democrats just can't accept that President Trump did not collude with Russia. So why can't they accept it? Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer is on deck to answer that question.
Plus, a little girl asked her daddy at Disney to sing, and he did it. And oh boy, this moment now going viral.
For Mr. Barr to quickly issue a 4-page report in his attempt to try and exonerate President Trump has too much of the odor of political expediency.
We don't need you interpreting for us. It was condescending. It was arrogant.
Chuck and Nancy, the Mueller report finding no collusion, but tell that to Democrats. A new poll reveals that 59%, almost 6 in 10 of them, refused to accept the no collusion conclusion.
Well, here to weigh in, former White House Press Secretary and America First Action Senior Advisor, Mr. Sean Spicer. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ed.
It seems
How
like
are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's good to have you here. It seems like Democrats went from collusion, couldn't prove that. Let's go to obstruction. Now there's a cover-up. Bill Barr is a part of it.
Well, look, it's not a shocker. I mean, for 2 things. Number one, they're invested in this. This is all they have. The president's accomplished a lot when you look at what he's done with his agenda and for this country and the direction that it's gone, the economy, veterans. what he's done for Israel, all that. And the Democrats went all in on this Russia collusion thing. So now they have nowhere to go. So that makes sense politically. But second, if you think about this for a second, everywhere that Democrats get their news, this is what they've been fed. So the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, and CNN wrote over 8,500 stories, an average of 13 a day on the Mueller report and this collusion thing. When you look at the three major networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, there are over 2,200 minutes of coverage dedicated to this. So for the Democrats, they went all in. The organizations and the media outlets that cover them and support them went all in on this, and now they have nowhere to go.
You know, Sean, we were saying last hour that you can't just run against Trump. You have to actually run for something. So I don't understand why Democrats don't realize that talking about constant investigations and collusion when there was no collusion at some point is going to hurt them when Americans are saying, hold on a second, what are you going to do about health care? What are you going to do about taxes? What are you going to do about immigration? And they're just not talking about that at all.
Well, right, and I think that's true, and that's what they tried to do in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. It failed, and they're trying to do that again. The problem is that they're sort of threading a needle here, which is trying to appease their base, which wants them to say that they're going to defeat Trump, to stand up to Trump, and then appealing to sort of that middle margin of voters that's going to win and decide an election that cares about accomplishments and agenda. And that's the problem that they have, is that they're so catering to that base that they've lost the ability to communicate to the middle. Mm-hmm. So from a political standpoint, as a Republican, as somebody who wants to see the president reelected, I support where they're going. But I don't think that that's a recipe for success.
You're right, and they're getting their news from one spot. You laid it out very well. Sean Spicer, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean.
You bet, guys.
Well, socialism is all the rage on college campuses, but what happens when you ask those students to redistribute their own GPAs to the less fortunate?
Help them. I would want to say no, straight up. I don't think that'd be a good idea. So, no, I wouldn't sacrifice my own things.
Well, look at that. Campus reform has more of the priceless reactions.
And Jed lost her mind when she saw the now viral trend of a snake massage.
Why?
So we brought some here for you, Jed, to help you conquer that.
You guys are so charitable.
Get ready for the massage.
You know what? Someone's getting in trouble. Oh, look at it. Ooh.